The first thing you need to know is this. My village is tiny, secluded, and surrounded by dense, whispering forests. It's the kind of place where you'd never expect anything unusual to happen. But one Christmas evening, everything changed. My partner and I decided to take a walk after a heavy festive meal. It was already dark by 5 p.m., and the air was still. We grabbed a flashlight and my camera, thinking it would be a peaceful way to end the day. What started as a casual stroll turned into a night we'll never forget. The path we chose skirts the edge of a dense forest, connecting our village to the next. It's about a 20-minute walk, usually quiet and serene. That evening, the trees seemed to press in closer, their shadows twisting under the beam of our flashlight. As we walked deeper into the darkness, the only sounds were the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional rustle of leaves. Suddenly, the flashlight's beam bounced off something reflective. We stopped in our tracks. It was a car parked deep within the forest. This was odd. Vehicles weren't allowed on this path, and the location was so remote it would be nearly impossible to drive there unnoticed. The windows were frosted, suggesting the car had been there for hours. The air around us grew heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. My partner aimed the flashlight at the car while I stared, unease creeping in. Why was it there? And how had it gotten so deep into the woods? Nearby, an oddly shaped tree caught my attention. Wanting to distract myself, I crouched down to photograph it, adjusting my camera for the perfect shot. That's when my partner's voice shattered the silence. "There's someone standing behind us." My stomach dropped. Slowly I turned. Just beyond the edge of the flashlight's beam, a man stood motionless. He wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just staring. My mind raced for an explanation. Maybe he was startled to see us near his car. Trying to remain calm, I stood up and called out, explaining that I was just taking pictures. He didn't react. His silence was deafening, his stare unwavering. "Do you need help?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "That's not necessary," he replied flatly, his tone as cold as the frosty night air. The weight of the moment was unbearable. My partner and I exchanged a glance. No words were needed. We turned and began walking briskly toward the next village, the flashlight's beam bouncing with each hurried step. Every so often, I glanced over my shoulder, certain we were being followed. The crunch of our boots on the gravel seemed impossibly loud, masking any other sounds that might be there. When we finally reached the safety of a streetlight, I allowed myself to look back. The uneasy feeling returned in full force. The car, the one we'd seen deep in the forest, was moving slowly. Its headlights were off, and it crept out of the woods like a predator stalking its prey. It paused briefly, as if deciding what to do next, before retreating back into the shadows. It vanished, swallowed by the forest, leaving behind only questions and a chilling sense of dread. Back at home, the encounter replayed in my mind over and over. Something about the man, the car, and the oppressive silence didn't sit right. I Googled the partial license plate I'd memorized and discovered the car was registered to a city 6 hours away. This raised more questions than answers. Our country was under strict lockdown at the time, making such long-distance travel nearly impossible unless for urgent reasons. What was he doing there, in that remote forest? We avoided the forest entirely on the way home, taking a much longer route. Our flashlight's battery died halfway, leaving us stumbling through near-total darkness. By the time we reached the safety of our house, my hands were trembling as I called the authorities. I recounted every detail I could remember, though part of me regretted not calling sooner. The frosted windows of the car, its stillness. It had been there for hours, and yet somehow the man had managed to appear behind us without a sound. The thought of what might have happened if I'd been alone still haunts me. That night, I barely slept, grateful for the flashlight, my partner, and the safety of home. But even now, the memory of that silent man and his chilling stare lingers, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. It started as a quiet Christmas night. I was 17, babysitting my 3-year-old sister while our mom worked the night shift. Our basset hound, Matilda, was dozing lazily beside us. By 9 p.m., the house was steeped in darkness, and my sister was cuddled up on the couch, drifting to sleep. The evening had been calm until Matilda suddenly went ballistic. Her growls were low and guttural, unlike anything I had heard from her before. The fur on her back stood on end, and her floppy ears perked. She barked ferociously, staring at the front door as if something or someone was there. My stomach tightened. Matilda wasn't the type to bark at shadows. Instinct kicked in. I scooped up my groggy sister and carried her to the bathroom, the only room in the house without windows. Setting her gently in the bathtub, I whispered for her to stay quiet and locked the door from the inside. She looked at me with wide eyes, sensing my fear but remaining silent. I crept back into the living room to grab my phone, my hands trembling. That's when it started. Loud, frantic banging on the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. Each knock was forceful, almost desperate. I edged closer to the door, peeking through the peephole. A man stood there, his face smeared with blood. His eyes darted wildly and his lips moved in a silent plea. Matilda's barking became ferocious, her growls echoing through the small house. My mind raced. Who was this man, and why was he at our door? Before I could act, another figure appeared, a second man. He lunged at the bloody stranger, fists flying. The scene unfolded in a blur of violence, right there on my doorstep. The first man, still pounding on the door, screamed, "Please help me." I froze. My 17-year-old mind couldn't process what was happening. 2 men, one covered in blood, were fighting just feet away from me. I wanted to open the door to help, but fear rooted me in place. My only defense was a locked door and a barking dog. My sister's safety was all I could think about. With trembling hands, I finally dialed 911. My voice shook as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. Every second felt like an eternity as the banging and shouting continued. Finally, the noise stopped. Moments later, red and blue lights flooded the street. Police officers knocked on the door, their calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos I'd just witnessed. I unlocked the door with fumbling fingers, relief washing over me. They explained that the bloody man had been attacked nearby and had fled to my house for help. His assailant had chased him, trying to finish what he started. The officers assured me that both men were in custody and that my family was safe. Inside the house, Matilda still growled softly, her protective instincts on high alert. I retrieved my sister from the bathroom, her tear-streaked face breaking my heart. That night, none of us slept in our own rooms. We all huddled together in my mom's bed, seeking comfort in each other. Looking back, I know I made the right choice not to open the door, but the memory of that man's desperate eyes haunts me. I often wonder what would have happened if I had let him in. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes, even doing the right thing leaves you with unanswered questions and lingering guilt. It was supposed to be a normal day. My daughter, barely 18 months old, was her usual curious and energetic self. We went to the store, something we did often. She loved exploring, holding my hand as we wandered through the aisles. Her tiny squeals of joy and endless fascination with colorful boxes always made me smile. But that day, something would happen that would leave a lasting scar on my sense of security. As we moved through the store, I let her walk beside me, holding her hand whenever I could. But with my arms full of groceries, I had to let go for just a moment to pay at the register. She was only a few feet away, happily waving at strangers passing by. Her friendliness was a constant. She greeted everyone with a bright smile and a cheerful "hi." While I was busy paying, everything unraveled in an instant. I turned around and my heart stopped. A man I didn't recognize was holding my daughter. He had picked her up and was walking briskly toward the entrance. My mind blanked with panic, and for a moment I couldn't move. Then instincts kicked in. The store's one-way doors didn't open for him. He hesitated, searching for another exit, and in that split second, I acted. I ran toward him, shouting for him to stop. Just as he turned to look for another way out, I lunged, slamming my fist into his temple. He stumbled, and I grabbed my daughter, holding her tightly as relief and terror washed over me. The man didn't stick around. He bolted out of the store, disappearing into the night before anyone could stop him. My daughter clung to me, sobbing, her small hands gripping my shirt tightly. I could feel her little body shaking, and it took everything I had to hold back my own tears. The cashier was already on the phone with the police, and other customers gathered around, trying to comfort me. One elderly woman handed me a bottle of water, while another gave my daughter a small stuffed toy to help calm her down. The support from strangers was a small beacon of light in what had been a terrifying ordeal. When the police arrived, they immediately took my statement and began searching the area. Witnesses described the man as having a scruffy beard, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face. It wasn't much to go on, but the officers reassured me they would do everything they could to find him. They also reviewed the store's security footage, which captured the man lingering near us throughout our shopping trip. He had been watching us, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The thought sent shivers down my spine. This wasn't a random act. He had planned this. Later that evening, after ensuring we were safe, 2 officers returned to our home. They brought a box of diapers, a few bags of groceries, and even toys for my daughter. One of them handed me a Christmas card, inside of which was a heartfelt note. "You're a strong father. Your daughter is lucky to have you." The small gesture brought me to tears. That day changed everything for me. I've never let go of my daughter's hand in public since. The memory of how close I came to losing her is something I'll carry forever. But it also taught me to always be vigilant and to cherish the moments of safety and love we often take for granted. My daughter, blissfully unaware of how close we came to tragedy, played happily with her new toys that night. Watching her, I promised myself I would never let my guard down again.